Hello and welcome to the Transform Your Workplace podcast. This is a bonus episode. I'm Lacey Partipillo, Senior Director of Client Success here at Xenium, and I've had an opportunity to do a few podcasts here to support Brandon, and excited to be here today with Emily Etherington, one of our HR business partners. Emily's been with Xenium for over a decade and has a lot of experience with the topic that we're here to talk about today. So, just managing and recognizing substance abuse in the workplace. And it's a timely topic. This is for many of our clients right now, and excited to be able to talk with you about how you've supported your clients. So,
Yeah,
let's start with just, why is this topic important? What do you think employers should be aware of when it comes to this in their workplaces?
sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to share my experience and strength on this topic. We are experiencing a national epidemic with substance abuse disorder, and unfortunately, our workplaces are not immune from the impacts of that. We feel it. Many of us have experience with that in our families, in our friend groups, and it certainly does impact the workplace greatly. From a risk management perspective, safety is a big topic, and from employee well being, which impacts productivity, retention, and ultimately the success of your organization, as you need happy, healthy employees to be able to perform efficiently and productively in your workplace and be their best.
Absolutely. When you're working with your clients, what are some of the key approaches that folks will take when they're addressing this?
Sure. You might already have as an employer some tools in your handbook from a policy and a practice perspective. A couple of the most common approaches and policies that we see are one, the company assistance, and then the last chance agreement. I can tell you a little bit about both, and Xenium or your HR team is a great resource for reviewing and updating these policies. Company assistance program is an approach that we take usually when an employee comes to us to disclose a struggle with a substance abuse disorder. Particularly, this happens when performance has not yet been severely impacted, or there hasn't been a major policy violation or performance management, but the employee might need some assistance, need some time away, need some resources
Mhm.
to address a substance abuse disorder. And then a last chance agreement is more something that we employ either alongside of a company assistance program or as a measure to address a policy violation, such as when somebody is coming to work intoxicated or is missing work or other performance markers because of a substance abuse disorder. There's some performance issues or some policy violations going on. Then you can employ a last chance agreement to apply an extra layer of accountability.
Mhm. I've seen many organizations have zero tolerance policies. We hear that
Mhm.
language around a drug and alcohol policy, zero tolerance for that. What's your opinion on
Yeah.
that? How does that is it in conflict with this supportive way to help employees when they're dealing with this? How do they work together? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think it's important to say that you're not going to tolerate substance abuse in the workplace. That's okay to say that. We don't tolerate that in the same way that we don't tolerate harassment.
Mhm,
We don't tolerate retaliation. That means if this is happening, we're going to take an action.
mhm,
It doesn't mean that if we find out that you have a substance abuse disorder, you're fired. So, what it means is that there is an action and a reaction to the problem of substance abuse impacting the workplace. So you can have a zero tolerance policy, but you can have some tools that you employ to manage and redirect the employee, just like if someone tells a really bad joke in poor taste in the workplace, it might be a policy
mhm.
violation, but it doesn't necessarily mean a
Okay,
termination. But we're going to address it and we're going to take it seriously and employ our resources to correct
okay.
it.
I wanna go back to what you were saying about company assistance program. Can you say a little bit more about what might be involved in that, and how might that support an employee to get their life back on track and be successful in their job?
Yeah, it provides some structure and resources and support for an employee. And what's important to understand about substance abuse disorder is that it is a serious health condition. And so it often makes sense for us to treat it as such. And so what company assistance policy might outline is that the company is going to provide administrative aids, such as identifying treatment facilities or providers that are covered by the insurance plan, or authorizing time off, sometimes protected time off under federal or state protected leave laws, for the employee to receive an assessment and engage in the appropriate level of treatment. We're going to maybe share information about local AA or NA chapters or meetings, or just wrap around the employee and assist them with other resources. Maybe there is housing insecurity or food insecurity. And then having this structure and having this type of assistance where, your employer is applying accountability, but also offering resources, it gives the consistent reassurance that the employee is valued and we want them to
Mhm.
succeed.
How does that differ from the last chance agreement other than obviously the last chance agreement is there maybe has been a policy violation, it sounds like,
Yeah.
and we're giving this employee kind of one more chance, as it says, to get it together. Are there differences in the
Yeah.
resources you might provide with the last chance agreement?
Yeah, for sure. Under a last chance agreement, there's some extra accountability. And what that looks like typically is a management referral. And we do recommend that you use a third party for a last chance agreement and a management referral, because that removes your frontline managers from the really sensitive information that is HIPAA protected, the sensitive details about this person's serious health condition and their diagnosis and their treatment plan. A management referral can be usually sometimes under an employee assistance program if you have
Mm,
one, or you can engage with a contract under with a treatment facility where they will just charge a fee to manage these cases for you. The employer refers the employee who's impacted to the third party, and they engage in that process of helping you get a treatment assessment, matching you with a treatment provider, and then managing your progress under this last chance agreement, which really is the agreement is you need to engage in the appropriate treatment and successfully complete it and treat and resolve your substance abuse disorder if that's what you're diagnosed with, so that you can successfully return to work. And those treatment providers under that management referral will assess your employee, release them back to work when appropriate, and then manage the ongoing treatment, which includes engaging in that program, submitting to those drug screens, and demonstrating sustained sobriety and the effectiveness of that treatment, so that as the employer, you can feel comfortable that risk is managed and that employee is safe and your work
mhm,
environment is safe.
mhm. When you think about what does it take for an employer to help an employee through this successfully, what has to be in place for that? These seem like really challenging situations that managers and employers have to go through.
Is really challenging, and that's a key question. And I just want to share a sobering statistic with you before I jump into what makes these things successful. It is that substance abuse disorder impacts 1 out of 10 people in the nation.
Wow.
And so, again, the employment environment is not immune to that. You can imagine that if you have 100 employees, you likely have 10 people on your team that are dealing with a substance abuse disorder. And no one is immune from that, regardless of their position, their title, their status. Substance abuse disorder does impact lower income communities more heavily because of the lack of access to resources that leads to the inability to mask those symptoms over a longer period of time. But what I'm getting at is that we're all impacted by this, and what it takes to be successful, whether it's a company assistance or a management referral under a last chance agreement, is that both parties have to be willing.
Mhm.
The employer needs to be willing to engage and to support this process, and the impacted employee has to be willing to engage in treatment and engage in the process and that structure and accountability that we're applying in support of that employee.
Yeah.
And then the accountability piece has to be present. It really is on the impacted employee who has the serious health condition, or even if it's not diagnosed as a substance abuse disorder, if it's just problem drinking.
Mhm.
Like alcohol abuse. They need to be accountable to that, and they need to be willing to engage in the process and follow through. And so those are two really important factors that I can think of that lead to the success of these types of programs.
Sure.
It's important to also note that as the employer, professionalism is key. We have relationships with our employees. We tend to care about our employees. We get attached to the outcome. And having that third party manage your referrals and your last chance agreements helps you separate from that and remain objective. Um, and it's really important that we maintain professional boundaries and separate our personal feelings from the process, and assure also that if we're providing that assistance, that we're doing that equitably across the organization.
What's the impact to this inside of a workplace, to the culture, in not addressing it? And what have you seen happen when really an employer gets a handle on this with individual employees? Does it make a positive impact? How does it do that?
Yeah, I think it does make a positive impact. It is a really big challenge, substance abuse disorder. It is a devastating disease for many families and individuals. So, any support coming from any direction, whether it's from your employer or from your family, is going to have a positive impact on the individual. And when you have those success stories and your employees that have relationships with each other see the successful outcomes, then that has a really positive impact on your culture. Just knowing that there's support for that, and more people might be willing to engage in the process and get the assistance that they need if they're aware that they have those resources and that they have that support, and they don't have to hide and mask and really just struggle alone with this disorder.
Yeah, I think a burden for employers and managers when you're caring about employees. This is like work that we do with our hearts, and taking care of employees and just total mental health is something that we've been talking a lot about here at Xenium and on the podcast. It's come up a lot. So I think this is a piece of that, and an important topic, I think, for sure, for employers right now to be mindful of, because like you said, so many folks are going through this, and that statistic is pretty sobering. I didn't know that was the impact. It's a lot of people.
I appreciate you being willing to shed some light on this. I think a lot of employers are aware that it's an issue and they don't know how to approach it. There's a lot of resources out there besides just your policies. It's important to help your managers recognize substance abuse disorder. There's training for reasonable suspicion so that managers understand how to recognize the symptoms of current intoxication and recognize the symptoms of substance abuse disorder and how that manifests in behaviors and performance issues. While we can't accuse an employee of having a substance abuse disorder or diagnose an employee with a substance abuse disorder or anything else, we can certainly ask the right questions and offer the support, and then sit down with our employee and ask them to let us know what's going on and if there's some way that we can assist you to help resolve these performance or behavior issues. And then when we do recognize present intoxication, we can take that action safely to get a drug screen, which might trigger the type of last chance agreement and accountability that someone needs to turn their life around.
Important stuff. I think we'll put some extra resources in the show notes. So resources for employee assistance programs that we feel really good about referring out. And there's a lot of resources out there on this. So we'll make sure that listeners have that. And I know that you're open to our listeners connecting with you on LinkedIn. So
Yes.
we'll make sure that Emily's contact information is there. So thanks so much, Em, for being a part of this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent. So discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.